something happened as well.
Shows 9 and 10.
You were just telling me that you were surprised to notice and to really discover for yourself how much physical trouble your emotional worry could cause you. And you said you discovered it mainly yesterday, or yes, during the day, or just after you had the shock?
After I had a particular shock, I was very ill, and I was in bed all day because this particular shock happened about 6:30. Well, it happened, I suppose, just a little after 7 in the morning. And after it was over, I was quite ill to my stomach, and eventually I had nothing in my stomach, and I still felt quite ill, and then I went...
You were still vomiting?
Yes, but I had nothing in my stomach, and I kept on vomiting, and so I went and lay down in the bed for a while, and when I got up, I was feeling sick. I wanted to go to the bathroom, so I fainted on the floor. I mean, I wasn't out that long. I just fainted, and I fell on the floor, and I was there for a matter of minutes, I guess. And then I got up again, and then later when I tried to get off the bed, I fainted on the bed again, and then after that, every time I tried to get up off the bed, I just couldn't get up. Even to make it from the bed to the door, I was just fainting.
And you began to realize that this must have...
Well, I began to realize that there was nothing, that before that I'd been fine. I wasn't sick at all. And then after this happened, I was violently ill.
This emotional shock?
Yes, and it lasted all day yesterday, and this morning, when I had to get up, I lost my appetite completely. I didn't eat anything yesterday, and towards the end of the evening, I had some soup and a cup of tea, and it's all I could seem to take. Even then, I had to force myself. This morning I wasn't hungry, and I was on the verge of fainting again. Every time I got up, I would go very, very black, and I'd have to steady myself so that I wouldn't fall.
Feeling a little more relaxed now?
Yes, I feel much better now. I was out in the fresh air, and but I still don't feel completely relaxed.
You never feel really, do you? Or very seldom?
No, I don't feel very often relaxed, actually. I'm more aware of the fact during the past, well, let's say the past few months, and I've been trying to make myself relax a little more, and trying to avoid many things that would upset me. I mean, of course, I realize many things now than I did, let's say, a couple of years back.
In what way?
Well, I think it's come to the point where I've been able to analyze myself a little more, and it's only been actually till very recently that I discovered some of the things that really had been bothering me very much. I got to the point where I could sit down and maybe... Well, as I said to you one day, it was like putting something into a machine,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of ticked away there year after year, and finally, all of a sudden, the answer came out. I realized one particular day when I started thinking, well, let's say, take my father, I started thinking about my father and about his death and what had caused it, and I knew I'd been blaming myself for years because of his death, but I couldn't think about it, and when I started to think about this, all of a sudden I just went to pieces this particular day. And then I realized really how badly it had been affecting me. And I started to think, well, why? And all of a sudden the answer came, and I knew why it had been affecting me. When I understood it a little more...
Why had it been affecting you so much?
Well, I had felt responsible for his death, and I suppose my father had treated me very badly, and well, it's rather a complicated thing. I don't think it's something you could...
Not in a few minutes.
Not in a few minutes you couldn't talk about it, but I realized exactly why I had been feeling so guilty about this particular thing. And it's been with me for years now.
But the guilt feeling, even after you realized this, the guilt feeling didn't stop, and you apparently haven't felt very much better.
Well, I suppose as you go, if you're living a particular type of life and you've come from an environment where things have been, let's say, very abnormal, and if you're living away from home when you're very young, the way I was when I was about 15, I mean, many things happen to you, many things affect you, that whereas a girl is living normally with her parents and she has a normal family life and a normal life, she isn't affected the same way. And I suppose as years went by, year after year, things just seem to start getting better. They seem to get worse and worse and worse. And I suppose many things happened to me that maybe might not have happened to the average girl. And
did you have treatment for for all the troubles you had? A lot of...
No, I've never had treatment for this. It's just accumulated year after year. And
you realized...
I've had very much responsibility. I mean...
well, you have realized then some time ago that much of your trouble is due to this guilt feeling which you have carried all over these years because of your father's death. You felt responsible.
I suppose
for
a lot of the trouble was that because when I was living at home, my father was always very violent, and finally when I left home it was because of my father. And I suppose I'd suffered very much discouragement because of my father. Let's say when I was going to school, he did everything to discourage me, and it seemed that the rest of the family, my mother didn't seem to have any heart anymore, I guess, in life or anything, and she never paid very much attention to us, and quite frequently when we needed help, well, we never got any help at all. And of course, being the oldest in the family, I always had to take care of the younger children to make sure that my father didn't hurt them, and if anyone got beaten, it was always me. And if,
in spite of all this, when your father died, you still felt guilty and responsible.
Well, you see, I felt, as I said, when I left home, it was basically because of my father, because my father had ordered me out of the house. He told me I couldn't go to school anymore and to get out and get a job. And I did. I got out and I got a job, and it was just before I graduated, and I'd been counting on a scholarship, and I was very, very bitter about the whole thing, that my father should have made me do this, and it seemed like the end of the world to me at the time. And then I was living by myself in dingy little rooms in the downtown section of the city where I lived, and I had no friends, and I was very lonely and very bitter, and I seemed to have lost all heart in life and everything. And of course I blame my father for all this. One half of me, I hated him very, very much. And the other half of me, I suppose underneath I loved him, because he was my father. And then
was that kind of a conflict?
when he died, I hadn't, no one had told me that he was in the hospital, and when they finally did tell me, I said I won't go and see him. And then that afternoon, I said, well, okay, let bygones be bygones, go and see him. So I was just on the verge of going, and there was a telephone call, and he just died. And then it turned out that my father had been sick for many years, and he died from his brain had evidently been eaten away over the years, and I don't know what you'd call it, a cancer or something. And during the last couple of days of his life, I didn't remember this until a while back, and I was thinking about it. What had he said before he died? And I remembered. He'd said, "Nobody wants me." And I suppose as the years went by, he was very sick, and he had a large family, and he had many debts to pay off, because he'd lost a couple of businesses, and he had all this pressure on him, and as a child I just never understood, and all I could do was hate him. And I suppose the rest of our family, I guess we all hated him. And here he was under this extreme pressure, and he would never take the money to go to the hospital and find out what was wrong with him. And there were days when he was just like a madman. He was very violent. In the last couple of days of his life, he was wandering around the yard and without his clothes and doing odd things. I mean, I didn't know about any of these things until my family never even told me about it until after it had all happened. They took him to the hospital, and they had to take him in a straitjacket, and all the neighbors were out watching, and he kept on yelling, "Nobody wants me, nobody wants me."